We continue on our merry adventure building a woodland gnome using needlefelting techniques, wool and wire armatures. In the last chapter I built the torso and attached the head, so now we get to the scary part, felting the face. If this is your first time here, welcome! We're endeavoring to document the creative journey of creating a woodland gnome. If you love the idea of creating an entire doll over a wire armature and then sculpting wool and cover it in doll skin, the entire 8-part series will be of immense help to you. Though we call him a gnome, I suppose he can also embody the spirit of the homestead guardian, the Scandinavian tomte or niece, depending on his clothing and aura, don't you think? We'll get to that when it's time to dress him up. So grab yourself a cup of tea and enjoy the journey. Let us continue the build by adding the facial details and covering him in doll skin, the part I was most scared about. The original idea was to build this creature as he's inspired and beloved character in one of my husband's stories. I wanted to build him so we could photograph parts of the story. That idea is very much alive, but as time progressed, both in the story and my abilities, we realized he's not very suited to this task. Still, I wanted to share the making process with you, in case you two are intrigued about building one of your favorite characters in doll form. Once I had built the bodily extremities and put the torso and head together, I knew I had to build the scariest part. Why scary, you ask? Well, because at the time, I had never attempted a sort of character, a fantasy humanoid, so to speak. I knew I had to enlarge certain characteristics, and I was terrified of ruining months and months of work so far by making a face I did not particularly connect with. I knew the fabric covering was going to be really hard, so I gave myself a lot of time to think about it, research best techniques, and then just prayed for patience. But first, I had to come up with the actual face, how to sculpt this. I knew he was meant to be an old man, so I went for a jolly face instead of a more focused one, and I started with the nose, a sort of a guiding north star for the whole face. As a doll maker who started her journey making dolls for children and has long strayed from that path, I still struggled then to make somber or scary faces. I figured if he was going to portray emotion, I wanted him to at least be happy. Somehow, I missed the footage of building his nose, but it's really simple. I first rolled a ball of wool and needle felted it in the correct placement in the center of his face. I kept adding volume to the nose until it reached the profile I wanted, which you can find in the blueprint to tag along with me. Download the Sculpting a Woodland Gnome Companion guide for free. Link to get it down below. Once the main part of the nose was firmly secured and felted, I added 2 little balls to the sides for the nostrils and repeated the process until I felt he had the correct volume, comparing them to the main part of the nose. At the time I started this wool gnome, I never really looked at much anatomy or physiology, which can definitely come in handy when you're building dolls. Still, since he's meant to be a full creature, you can play a lot with the anatomy, both of his face and his body, and just aim for whatever feels right or entices your eyes. One less of a nose, bigger cheeks, larger forehead, go for it. There are no real rules when making fantasy creatures, although keeping things an believable anatomy for this planet might help you out the best. After adding some volume to the cheeks, I built the chin. For large dolls, I like to pre-roll bits of wool to add the features with a bit more precision. This method of building the nose, then the base of the cheeks, then chin, then sculpting the mouth line is one I devised by myself and have taught to many beginner doll makers. I think it helps you out a lot when you're learning to sculpt the dolls because it grounds the face immediately, helping you have a guiding feature for symmetry and volume of the rest of the features, which coincidentally is always the highest, tallest part of the face as well. Friends, once I reached the stage of making the lips, I started to relax. It seemed our little friendly gnome was actually coming together and he wasn't the stuff of nightmares. Still, in the back of my head, I knew the more I add, the more I will need to uncover through stitches in the fabric. I try to put those thoughts out of mind for as long as possible and concentrated on sculpting the face in a way that my heart felt satisfied. I believe we're ready. Here comes the crux of the matter when you build dolls with felting and you're to cover them in dollskin fabric, draping. When I made this doll, I was slightly terrified, as up until then I had found my groove and felt really confident draping skin on any normal doll face, even with lots of felting. But a nose this large, cheeks this pronounced, I knew I was in for a world of pain. My best recommendation is to take things slowly, pin and pin and pin, trying to keep the stretch of the fabric centered over the lips, nose, and forehead. And don't feel discouraged if you move and remove pins 100 times. That is just normal. At this time, I wanted to expand my techniques and sculpt the whole face without using any glue. I'm still slightly afraid of using glue on doll faces, as I don't know if the glue will end up eating the face 50 years from now. So for this occasion and a few others that came after, I refused to use any glue and did it all with tiny stitches. The way you do this is you first sculpt the nostrils and then you go around the nose in a clockwise motion. The closer the stitches together, the better the nose looks. When you're done, you go back to the head with your threads and tie the loose ends back there. If you want to tag along and make this woolen gnome with me, there's a handy companion guide with all measurements, blueprint, and a handy checklist of all the supplies I used to create them. Head to the video description to get the link to download Sculpting a Woodland Gnome Companion guide for free. As a perk, if you're interested in joining my upcoming class on how I now currently build my dolls with armature, you will be notified once the class is open to new students. Once I finish sculpting the lips and eye sockets, I drape the back of the head. This mainly means making darts where the fabric is behaving a little bit funny. Pinning the two sides together and cutting the excess fabric so you can make a seam by hand. This is by far one of my most favorite parts of making dolls. I used to abhor it, but now, draping the back of the head with as little seams as possible and making it as smooth as I can is one of my greatest achievements. And you don't even see it because I cover it with hair. But I know, friends, I know that under all that hair, there's nothing but beauty, and it fills me with a great sense of pride and achievement. Now, my little old man here has way more darts than usual because he has such an odd head and so much volume to the sides, on his cheeks, and that ginormous nose. So we did the best we could. Luckily for us, all those wrinkles at the sides of the cheeks would end up being obscured by the beautiful beard, so that kept me positive and not losing hope. I did get rid of most of them by enlarging the back darts into the face, so there's that. I finished him up by tying the neck with strong craft thread to cinch the fabric as tight as possible, and then strongly secure the bottom edge of the fabric to the torso and cut the excess. This is why it's so very important to felt very firm, so that when you're stretching the fabric, sculpting it into all sorts of nooks and crannies, it holds its shape and volume against the stretch of your very strong knit fabric. A little bit of blush with red beeswax, and now we're ready and feel more confident covering the whole body, don't we? I will see you in the next chapter, and don't forget to write all your questions so I can address them all in one final video. Until next time, my smiling woodland gnome and me.